Hello everyone, John AG here. Welcome back to my channel, Aurex. If you haven't yet, subscribe to my channel. In this channel, you will find the real information, real market updates that everyone cannot tell you. So please subscribe to this channel, and I love you all, my subscribers, for your support. And please watch this video to the very end because YouTube will not push my videos to more people. What you are looking at right now is not a mere commodity. It is not a shiny relic of a bygone era, nor is it a simple collector's item to be locked away and forgotten. What you are looking at is the ultimate financial truth. It is the undeniable, mathematically pure, historically undefeated antidote to a century of institutional theft. And as of this very moment in May 2026, it is officially the vanguard of an American rebellion. Listen closely, because what I am about to tell you changes everything you thought you knew about the money sitting in your bank account right now. Far from the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C., far from the high-frequency trading algorithms of Wall Street, a fundamental shift in the tectonic plates of global finance has just erupted. In the rugged, unforgiving, and deeply independent landscape of the American North, a line has been drawn in the snow. Alaska has officially defied the fiat system. They have legally recognized gold and silver not as assets, not as taxable properties, but as real, constitutionally protected money. They have looked at the crumbling architecture of the United States dollar. They have looked at the devastating invisible tax of inflation, and they have pulled the emergency brake. But why should you, sitting thousands of miles away, care about a legislative vote in Juneau, Alaska? Because this is the first domino in a chain reaction that is going to tear the global financial system down to its foundation. To understand the terrifying reality that the central bankers are trying to hide from you, we must first tear away the illusion you have been conditioned to believe since the day you opened your first savings account. Look at the paper currency in your wallet. Look at the digital numbers on your banking app. We call this money. We spend the most vital, irreplaceable, and precious resource we possess, our time, to acquire it. You wake up before dawn, you fight through traffic, you exhaust your mind and break your back for 8, 10, or 12 hours a day. You trade your life energy for these digital digits, trusting that when you need them tomorrow, next month, or 20 years from now in your retirement, they will hold the value of the sweat you poured into them. But they do not, and they never were designed to. Paper money eventually returns to its intrinsic value. Zero. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a documented historical law of gravity that has toppled empires from ancient Rome to Weimar Germany. And it is happening right now, in real time, to the United States dollar. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the currency you hold in your hands has lost over 96% of its purchasing power. It is a slow, methodical, deliberate bleed. It is a hidden tax enacted without a single vote from the American public. It requires no legislation. It requires no debate. It simply requires a central bank printing press and a digital keystroke. When the government and the central banking cartel print trillions of dollars out of thin air to fund endless overseas conflicts, to bail out catastrophically mismanaged banks, and to sustain unpayable national deficits, they are not creating new wealth. Wealth cannot be printed. Wealth must be produced. What they are actually doing is diluting the value of the dollars already sitting in your pocket. They are effectively reaching into your bank account, stealing your past labor, and transferring your purchasing power to the political elite and the financial institutions closest to the money spigot. This is exactly why you feel like you are running on an economic treadmill that keeps increasing in speed. This is why a single blue-collar income could support a family of 5, purchase a home, and own 2 vehicles in 1965. But today, 2 professional incomes barely cover the cost of rent and basic groceries. It is not that the goods and services you need to survive are inherently becoming more expensive. It is that the currency you are forced to use to buy them is becoming entirely worthless. But here is the terrifying part that the financial elites pray you never figure out. Real wealth, tangible, elemental, sovereign wealth, cannot be conjured into existence by a bureaucrat. It must be discovered. It must be mined from the earth. It requires physical energy, human labor, and absolute scarcity. For 5,000 years of human history, across every border, every culture, and every civilization, gold and silver have been the ultimate arbiters of value. They have outlasted every fiat currency ever created. They have survived hyperinflation, societal collapse, and world wars. They cannot be created by a central bank decree, and they cannot be destroyed by a political failure. An ounce of gold bought a fine, tailored suit for a senator in ancient Rome. An ounce of gold bought a fine, tailored suit for a businessman in the 1920s. And an ounce of gold buys a fine, tailored suit today. That is not a coincidence. That is the immutable mathematical certainty of sound money. This profound realization brings us directly to the monumental, system-shaking news breaking out of the last frontier. For decades, everyday citizens who understood this monetary truth, people who wanted to protect their families from the deliberate devaluation of the dollar by exchanging it for physical gold and silver, were aggressively penalized by the state. In many jurisdictions across the country, if you dared to trade your depreciating, unbacked fiat paper for actual constitutional money, the government would slap you with a sales tax. Think about the sheer absurdity of that concept for a moment. Taxing money. It was a deliberate institutional mechanism designed to introduce friction, to punish financial sovereignty, and to keep the public trapped within the burning building of the fiat ecosystem. They built a cage of tax codes to ensure you had no alternative but to use their dying currency. But the tide is violently turning. In May 2026, the Alaska State Legislature passed House Bill 1, widely known as the Sound Money Act. The vote was a stunning, undeniable mandate. Following a unanimous sweep in the State House, the Senate passed the bill with an overwhelming 19-1 margin. The lawmakers in Juneau stood up, looked Washington, D.C. squarely in the eye, and essentially said, "We will no longer participate in this financial suicide." Here is exactly what this revolutionary legislation does and why it is keeping central bankers awake at night. First, it establishes absolute legal tender status. The state of Alaska now formally and legally recognizes gold and silver coins, known as specie, alongside stamped bullion, as legal tender to the fullest extent permitted by the United States Constitution. They have stripped away the insulting label of commodity or collectible. They have restored these precious metals to their rightful, historical status as actual money. Second, it mandates absolute tax exemption. The law explicitly forbids any borough, city, or municipality within the state from levying sales or use taxes on the exchange of gold and silver. It entirely removes the penalty for opting out of the Federal Reserve System. It destroys the friction that kept the public enslaved to the dollar. Third, it establishes a future-proof architecture. The bill directs the state's Legislative Budget and Audit Committee to actively research and develop new forms of legal tender, specifically including gold-backed electronic transactional networks. They are not just returning to the past, they are building the technological infrastructure for a parallel, incorruptible economy. Now, let me be explicitly clear so there is no confusion about the magnitude of this event. This legislation does not force a single Alaskan citizen to use gold and silver at the local hardware store. It does not mandate that private businesses must abandon the dollar tomorrow. What it does is infinitely more dangerous to the establishment. It restores the ultimate freedom of choice. It broadcasts a massive, undeniable signal to the citizens of the state. If you want to step off the Federal Reserve's sinking ship, your local government will no longer punish you for it. If you choose to transact, save, and build your life in a currency that actually holds its value across time, you have the absolute legal right and the state's full blessing to do so. The people of Alaska understand this reality intuitively. These are men and women who work with their hands. They pull resources from the freezing earth. They understand that you cannot fake survival in a harsh, unforgiving wilderness. You cannot print a fire to keep your children warm. You cannot digitally generate a harvest. You need tangible, physical reality to survive. And today, their financial system finally reflects that undeniable reality. If you think this is just an isolated incident, a quirky law passed by a distant state, you are missing the biggest financial earthquake of the 21st century. To truly grasp why the entire nation is hurtling toward a monetary cliff, you have to look at the cold, hard mathematics. The relationship between fiat currency and physical gold is not a matter of political opinion. It is an economic absolute. Look at the trajectory of the American economy since 1971. When President Richard Nixon went on national television and temporarily severed the final fragile link between the United States dollar and the gold standard, he promised it was a short-term measure to stabilize the economy. That temporary measure unleashed over a half-century of the most reckless, unchecked, and catastrophic debt creation in the history of human civilization. Gold did not miraculously become more valuable over the last 50 years. The physical properties of the metal did not change. It simply sat in vaults, silent and unchanging. What changed was the paper measuring it. The measuring stick collapsed. According to the Constitution of the United States, specifically Article 1, Section 10, a clause that has been aggressively ignored by politicians for a century, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. The Founding Fathers understood the lethal danger of unbacked paper money. They had lived through the catastrophic hyperinflation of the continental currency during the Revolutionary War. They knew that if you give a government the power to print its own money, it will inevitably print itself into oblivion. They wrote that restriction into the Constitution to protect the working class from exactly what is happening right now in 2026. For decades, that constitutional shield lay dormant. But the crushing, suffocating weight of modern inflation has violently woken the sleeping giant. Alaska is not acting in isolation. They are simply the loudest, most aggressive voice in a rapidly growing, unstoppable chorus of sovereign states that have realized the federal government is driving the fiscal bus directly off a cliff. We saw the initial fractures form years ago when Utah became the first state in nearly a century to recognize gold and silver as legal tender. Then the dominoes began to fall. Wyoming, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana. As of this moment, a staggering 42 states have eliminated state sales taxes on precious metals. They have collectively recognized that taxing the only real money in existence is an act of economic self-destruction. But Alaska's move is a massive, unprecedented escalation. It proves that the momentum is no longer just crawling forward, it is accelerating at breakneck speed. State legislatures are desperately preparing lifeboats because they can see the iceberg dead ahead through the fog. They are looking at a national debt that has rocketing past catastrophic levels. They are watching interest payments on that debt completely eclipse the entire national defense budget. They know, with absolute mathematical certainty, that the system is terminal. When a state passes a sound money bill, it is not just a financial reform. It is a profound, legally binding declaration of no confidence in Washington, D.C. They are quietly, methodically establishing the legal and structural architecture for a localized, sound money economy that can survive the inevitable, catastrophic failure of the fiat dollar. Now, I want you to picture the sheer, unadulterated panic echoing through the Eccles building right now. How do you think the unelected board members of the Federal Reserve view this accelerating state-led rebellion? The entire concept of modern central banking relies heavily on one single critical factor: a captive audience. The fiat illusion only functions because you, the average citizen, have no other viable option. You are legally forced to use their depreciating currency. You are practically forced to keep your hard-earned wealth trapped within their heavily regulated fractional reserve banking system. And you are forced to absorb the punishing blow of the inflation they deliberately create to fund the government's infinite deficits. But what happens when the emergency exits are suddenly unlocked? What happens when a hardworking citizen in Alaska or Utah or Wyoming can simply decide to opt out of the madness? It creates the ultimate doomsday scenario for the central planners: direct currency competition. If the American people have the legal right, the infrastructure, and the tax protection to transact their daily business in gold and silver, the laws of economics dictate a massive shift. In a stable environment, Gresham's law dictates that bad money drives out good, meaning people will hoard their valuable gold and spend their worthless paper. But we are not in a stable environment. We are in the late stages of a currency crisis. In a highly unstable inflationary environment, Gresham's law flips. The market eventually refuses to accept the worthless paper entirely. Businesses, contractors, and individuals begin demanding the good money, the real money, in exchange for their physical goods and physical labor. The Federal Reserve simply cannot afford a parallel, uncorrupted, sound money economy operating freely within the borders of the United States. It pulls back the curtain. It exposes the grand illusion. It gives the everyday working man and woman a titanium shield against the silent theft of inflation. And a financially protected, independent citizen is infinitely harder to control, manipulate, and tax than a desperate one. We must zoom out even further, because the horrifying truth is that this is not just an American crisis. Alaska's fierce defiance is merely a localized microcosm of a massive, unstoppable geopolitical earthquake. The global rejection of the fiat dollar is the single most important defining trend of our generation. Look at what is unfolding on the world stage right now with the BRICS nations: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and their rapidly expanding list of allies. They are not just talking about de-dollarization, they are actively, aggressively executing it. They are settling massive bilateral trade agreements in local currencies, bypassing the dollar entirely. And more importantly, they are hoarding physical gold at a pace that has completely shocked Western analysts. Central banks across the Eastern Hemisphere and the Global South are buying thousands of tons of gold. They are quietly repatriating their existing gold reserves, pulling them out of the supposedly quote-unquote safe vaults in London and New York, and locking them down on their own sovereign soil. Why are they doing this with such frantic urgency? Because the entire world watched in absolute horror what happened when the West weaponized the global financial system. When dollar reserves were frozen and the SWIFT payment network was used as a geopolitical weapon, the unspoken rule of global finance was shattered. The message broadcast to every nation on Earth was unmistakable. If you hold your national wealth in our digital ledger, you do not actually own it. The global powers, the emerging markets, and now individual American states are all arriving at the exact same terrifying conclusion simultaneously. Counterparty risk is fatal. If your money relies on the promise of a politician, the solvency of a corrupt commercial bank, or the geopolitical goodwill of a foreign adversary, it is not money. It is merely unsecured credit. Gold is the only financial asset on the balance sheet of a central bank that is not simultaneously someone else's liability. It requires no signature. It requires no permission. It is completely independent. It is pure financial sovereignty. When the Central Bank of China empties its dollar reserves to buy thousands of tons of physical gold, they are actively constructing the financial architecture for a post-dollar world. When the state legislature of Alaska makes gold and silver legal tender, they are doing the exact same thing on a local, individual level. The macroeconomics of the globe and the microeconomics of the American state are violently converging. The 70-year era of unbacked paper dominance is drawing to a volatile, unpredictable, and dangerous close. Let us step away from the macroeconomic charts, the geopolitical chessboards, and the state capitals for a moment, and talk about the deeply human cost of this system. Finance is not just numbers blinking green and red on a computer screen. It is human life. It is the blood, the sweat, the stress, and the tears of the working class. When you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning, commute through grinding traffic to a job, work an honest, grueling shift, and come home with your body aching and your mind exhausted, you are making a profound sacrifice. You are trading unrecoverable pieces of your finite lifespan for a paycheck. You are storing your precious life energy into a financial battery, trusting it will be there when your body is broken and you can no longer labor. Inflation is a gaping, deliberate hole drilled into the side of that battery. When the central banking cartel expands the money supply by trillions, they are actively siphoning your life energy out of your savings account while you sleep. They are stealing your past labor to finance present political corruption. It is a profound, unforgivable moral failure. It robs the elderly of their dignified retirement, forcing them back into the workforce when they should be resting. It robs young couples of the ability to purchase a simple starter home and raise a family. It violently destroys the middle class, hollowing out once thriving communities and replacing hope with a crushing, inescapable daily anxiety about how to pay the next utility bill. This is exactly why I speak with such intense passion about this on Aurex. This channel is not about getting rich quick. This is about absolute self-defense. This is about human dignity. When a state like Alaska stands up against the immense pressure of the federal machine and says, "We will recognize and protect real money," they are throwing a lifeline to their citizens. They are handing them the legal mechanism to plug the leak in their financial battery. They are giving hardworking families a way to preserve their labor across time and space without it being silently confiscated by unelected bureaucrats in Washington. So, what do you do right now, today, as this paradigm shift accelerates around you? How do you navigate a rapidly fracturing world where the fiat system is actively collapsing and sovereign entities are scrambling to reinstate hard money? You must become your own central bank. You cannot afford to wait for your state legislature to pass a sound money bill to save you. You cannot wait for a politician to mathematically balance a budget that is mathematically impossible to balance. The system will continue to print currency until the system fundamentally breaks, because printing is the only tool left in their arsenal. First, you must aggressively educate yourself. You are already taking the most vital step by watching this channel, but you must dive deeper. You have to internalize the critical difference between currency and money. Fiat paper is merely a medium of exchange. Gold and silver are long-term stores of value. One is designed to lose value, the other is designed to preserve it. Second, you must acquire real, tangible assets. You must physically transition a portion of your stored life energy out of the digital illusion and into physical reality. Physical gold and silver bullion, precisely the type that the state of Alaska has just moved to legally protect, are the ultimate, historically proven insurance policies against systemic financial failure. You do not buy precious metals to get wealthy. You buy them to prevent yourself from becoming impoverished when the paper system inevitably resets. Third, you must hold your wealth outside the banking matrix. If you do not physically hold it in your own possession, you do not actually own it. Paper contracts, exchange-traded funds, and digital promises issued by Wall Street are the exact counterparty risks we are desperately trying to escape. The Alaska legislation explicitly protects the unhindered exchange of physical specie, actual coins and bullion stamped with their true weight and purity. That physical possession is your ultimate goal. We are rapidly entering a period of profound, unprecedented financial turbulence. The historical transition from a dying fiat standard back to a commodity-backed, sound money reality is never peaceful. It is historically accompanied by massive market volatility, crippling inflation spikes, deep societal unrest, and intense geopolitical conflict. But amidst that chaos, there is an unparalleled opportunity for those who are awake, aware, and positioned correctly. True wealth is never actually destroyed in a global financial crisis. It is simply transferred. It transfers violently from the hands of those who blindly trust the depreciating paper to the hands of those who hold the tangible, eternal assets. Alaska has just rung the warning bell for the entire world to hear. The last frontier has boldly declared that they will not go quietly into the dark night of fiat collapse. They have chosen reality over illusion. The only question that matters now is, what will you choose? Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for your vital time, your unyielding trust, and your continued support of this mission. If you found truth and value in this breakdown, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment below. Tell me exactly what state or country you are watching from, and tell me if your local leaders are making any moves towards sound money. Share this video with your family, your friends, and anyone you care about protecting. The algorithm actively suppresses this kind of raw financial truth, so I rely entirely on you, the Aurex community, to bypass the censorship and get this warning out to the world. Stay intensely vigilant, stay firmly grounded in physical reality, and I will see you in the next one.